Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, the new patch brings with it a slew of new stuff, and this video is focusing on one of the new Emperor's Children characters. Laviscus is the Lord Exultant and will be our focus today. Some of you may have seen data mines for the character and been excited, for good reason. Laviscus looks to be a really solid raid character, so let's discuss. If you're here for a 15-second summary, Laviscus is a melee character whose kit centers around outperforming his allies, which is most notable in Guild Raid. His active is essentially a free bit of damage that does not end his turn and gives a critical hit boost to the next attack against that target. His passive is where the magic happens, as he adds the damage done by his allies to his own attack damage. He is likely to be a raid-focused character, and I can't see him being great in other game modes. Thanks, as always, to my Patreons for their support. Laviscus is an epic unlock via Epic Battle Pass. I'll talk more about unlocking him later on. As usual, Snowprint's art department have done a phenomenal job with the character's model and animations. He has two traits, the Emperor's Children faction trait, Thrill Seekers, as well as the Crushing Strike trait. He has a melee power attack with 1 hit and a movement speed of 3. His stats on screen are at max settings, and Tawan, Tacticus Ambassador and friend, has helpfully done some analytics to help me create this radar chart. Laviscus has a health and armor stat that put him above the 75th centile for both, and mediocre damage stats at baseline. His active ability is called Euphoric Strikes. This does 1 power hit of damage to an adjacent enemy, and then gives the next attack against the target bonus critical hit chance. Crucially, the active doesn't end Laviscus's turn, letting him attack again, so you can already start to see how he might start to line up with Trajan. His passive is where things start to get spicy. Refusal to be outdone is a flavorful name because it speaks to how the ability works. Basically, when Laviscus is adjacent to an enemy, any time that enemy is hit, Laviscus takes the biggest hit of that attack and adds it to his own damage stat through a keyword named Outrage. It took me some time to wrap my head around it, but it helps when you think about the ability name. The character looks at the best of what his allies are doing and tries to one-up them. It is difficult to appreciate the abilities through text alone, so we can look at how everything ties together with some gameplay. The active is nice and easy. You use the active and then you can attack again, with a debuff over the enemy that shows it will suffer additional crit chance on the next attack. It doesn't end Laviscus's turn, so he can attack again. In this clip, you can see that if Laviscus starts the turn with his active, he can still move and attack someone else. The passive is more interesting. In this first clip, you can see that when you select Laviscus, the damage preview against Bellator is roughly 1000 damage. After Haskell attacks Bellator, Laviscus refuses to be outdone and gains damage through his passive ability. Now the preview increases to 3000 damage. If he hasn't moved, Crushing Strike gets you an extra 50%, and the same would happen with High Ground, so you can start to see how this all gets out of hand quite quickly. In this next clip, I am just demonstrating that on top of adding the damage of his allies to his own passive ability, Laviscus's active also adds to his own refusal to be outdone counter. As you can see, the outrage is added to the damage stat, so extra hits like those granted by Pestillion do not get the bonus. Right now, the only way to grant him uncapped extra hits is through a well-timed WAG with Boss Gulgorts. There is a bit of text in the ability description about not working with Psycho characters. As you will see in this clip, our outrage ticker does not increase when Archmatos gets called into action. Laviscus has the shared Emperor's Children relic, Intoxicating Elixir. This grants the relic bearer bonus damage for units that are taunted among a selection of other status effects. This is fairly unimpressive on Laviscus when compared to the other Emperor's Children, but it is better than having just a standard grenade. In terms of Mythic Missions, these are listed on screen. I don't think any are particularly challenging, and for Quest 4 I would use Trajan and Vitruvius combined with Laviscus's active. The excitement around Laviscus is in a raid context. The build-around aspect here is to combine him with characters that do big hits. Given Psychers don't work, the obvious next big hit character in a raid context is Carrion. The Custodes team looks a little bit like this these days, with the 3 characters most assured of their slot being Carrion, Trajan, and Karn. In the last 2 slots, you can have a combination of Dante, Ragnar, Vitruvius, and Abaddon, all having their own niche uses versus different bosses. With Laviscus, there is an incentive to bring characters that deal big hits, and there are pros and cons to each choice. Dante doesn't do much damage, but his passive boosts our damage dealers. Ragnar can do a reasonably large hit on the turn he warhowls and crits. Beyond that, he has a pretty low damage stat and struggles against high boss armor. Vitruvius does reasonably well and adds hits. Abaddon buffs Karn, so Karn does more damage to in turn buff Laviscus. Also, Abaddon's passive confers a damage boost directly to Laviscus, albeit a small one in the scope of things. Other characters enter the consideration too. Laviscus is going to be doing big, chunky hits. You might think about Thoriad, however he has a damage cap on his passive. Gulgorts is a fun one since he can provide an additional hit on a single turn with his Wog effect, and this hit is uncapped. I don't think he synergizes well enough with the rest of the team to replace one of the core characters, but it's a concept worth thinking about anyway. Asoth is another contender. He has high damage both with his base damage stat as well as through his active, which can be used twice over the course of a guild raid battle. His passive also increases the damage of Carrion and Karn's abilities, which ultimately contribute to Laviscus' damage too. You could potentially look at other characters that simply deal big amounts of damage. Tarvak and Godswill are the first two options that jump to mind, but my gut instinct is that they aren't quite there and we have to discount them for now. As with everything, the theory only takes you so far. The main thing with Laviscus is that you want him to be getting his Crushing Strike buff, as well as High Ground. If and when you do, that 50% damage bonus is absolutely humongous. So I sat down and went through the current boss list to see how things would break down. The bosses on the top are the bosses that you can pin in place or attack with a stationary character with relatively little difficulty for more than one turn for that big Crushing Strike bonus. The bosses on the bottom can theoretically be pinned, but it is much harder and not reliable. To demonstrate Laviscus' effectiveness, I thought we could look at a boss from each group with raid replays. The Screamer Killer is the definition of a static boss once you kill his adds and get him into melee. In this replay, we fight against a legendary 2 Screamer Killer with both of the primes up. We use the Plague Burst Crawler for some bonus damage. I'm using Asoth here since he gave me the best scores overall. Remember that this team is all about giving yourself the biggest hits. Asoth's passive boosts the damage of Karn and Carrion's passive. Ultimately, that nets a bigger damage boost for Laviscus. We end up with around 1.9 million here, which I think compares favourably to how the mech team performs against the same boss. In the text box on screen are the damage stats that my guild did facing this exact boss on this map during the live raid season. You can see there how Laviscus compares. I'll let the replay run through for you. For replay number 2, you can see that once again I'm running Asoth in that 5th character slot against the legendary 3 Belisarius Call. Once more, Asoth did better here than other options I tried in that slot. What I like about him too for this fight is how much his active and passive help your units tank Call's beam attack. The Biovore is the machine of war of choice here, and it's a little bit of a gamble in terms of not being able to reliably and consistently deal with the extra spawns, but that extra 20% damage bonus on Mythic is crazy when you consider that it buffs all of your units, which then buffs Laviscus even further. Once more, I'll leave this replay running on screen, and you can see how the damage that Laviscus does starts to get out of control pretty quickly with high ground and once you have the boss pinned in place. I'm sure I could have played this more optimally, but you get the idea here. On this slide here, I have manually calculated the damage that each of those characters did on each turn against Call. It does not include the out-of-turn damage that Karn did, nor the Biovore mines exploding, which is why there is a slight discrepancy between this total and the replay. Still, it should give you an appreciation for where all the damage is coming from on different turns. Next, my infographic. I haven't listed the cutoffs for ability thresholds here since you can get those fairly easily on any Tacticus website. From an investment point of view, Laviscus is relatively cheap on badges since you can get his passive damage bonus to 125% by just getting it to level 36. Thanks once more to Tawan, Tacticus Ambassador and friend, for his help here. I'll leave this on screen a bit for you to digest, but having explained all of his kit, you can now see why his base damage needed to be low. As I covered at the start of the video, Laviscus will be unlocked through an epic battle pass. As a reminder, this is the number of total shards we get for each of the thresholds in the battle pass. The last time we had an epic battle pass was for Dreer. At that time, there was also a mechanism to earn some shards through a home screen event. At time of recording, I don't know if there's been confirmed anything similar for Laviscus, but I would be surprised if we didn't have access to his shards through other means, especially as he looks so strong. I know that I've done an LRE segment for most characters lately, but I'm not going to bother for this guy since he clearly isn't an LRE character. We can conclude by assessing Laviscus's usability. Let's start with Horde modes. He just doesn't have the kit for the game mode and a pretty weak damage output on his own. I've given him a rare 1 here. What about War? He isn't particularly fast. There is a theoretical scenario where you can position him next to several enemies, kill 1 or 2 with your allies, and then let Laviscus one-shot the last character. It's pretty hard to do on a move 3 character, and I'm not convinced it's going to be a consistent application, so I've given him a 2.5 here. Finally, raids. Well, it is clear that this is going to be his home and he looks incredible in the Custodes team and alongside Carrion. I've given him a 4.5 for now, but I could see that moving up, especially if you are an expert at boss positioning to give Lav lots of crushing strike turns. I'll maybe sign off there. I hope that was useful and you enjoy playing with Laviscus. Thanks as always to my Patreons for their support, and bye for now.